Chapter 36. His Fight. The giant key spike had alerted everyone that something was wrong. Tsunade was the first to react because of the fact that it was Naruto that the spike was coming from. He was halfway to the Uchiha clan estate by the time she caught up to him, Naruto. He stopped and looked over his shoulder at her with an obvious anger on his face with crimson eyes. He took my daughter. Keep all your people out of my way or else I will take care of them as well. The Godime stared at him for a moment then nodded. If it's a clan matter then I will keep my people away. Naruto gave her a nod then was back on his way towards the Uchiha clan estate. Tsunade watched him leave then turned towards the Uzumaki estate and went towards it to talk to Tayayu. When the Godime arrived she quickly let herself in to see Tayayu pacing downstairs. The redhead didn't know what was happening. Her husband left a corpse upstairs and just left without a word. She could feel his ki radiating around the village but didn't want to leave Carrie here alone. Tsunade looked at the woman as she paced with Carrie sitting on the couch. Carrie saw her grandma and smiled. Grandma. That snapped the Uzumaki matriarch out of it and she looked over at Tsunade. The older woman smiled at her. He is taking care of it Tayayu, you'll have Makoto back soon. She nodded her head then looked at Carrie who ran over to Tsunade to give her a hug. Tsunade smiled as she hugged her grandma then looked at her. Someone took Makoto grandma. It was the guy that comes by a lot to see her. Tsunade looked at her. Sasuke Uchiha. Do not worry about it sweetie, your daddy will get her back in no time. Carrie nodded her head then looked at her. Daddy is really mad, I can feel it. The older blonde woman smiled and kissed the girl's forehead. Your daddy gets mad often, it's part of his charm. The one we have to worry about getting angry is your mommy, she is the crazy one. They both looked back at Tayayu expecting some kind of response but the woman was distracted. She was worried about her husband and eldest daughter. Tsunade sighed. She remembered what it was like to worry about the blonde idiot as well. She still worried about him quite a bit but she wasn't the prime worrier anymore. Tayayu looked over at them finally then sat down and motioned for Carrie to come to her. Carrie smiled and ran over to her mother and gave her a hug. Don't worry mommy, everyone says daddy is the best shinobi there is. Tayayu smiled at her daughter. Well your daddy needs to stop telling you those lies because I am the best. Carrie gave her the smile that she had inherited from her father making Tayayu smile at her a little more. Tsunade came and sat down with the other women to wait for the blonde man to return. With Naruto at the Uchiha clan estate. Naruto arrived at the entrance to the estate to see it had been left open as well as marks in the ground. From just glancing at the marks he was able to tell that his daughter had been fighting the whole way there. It made him smile to see that she definitely had the Uzumaki spirit in her. With a small release of chakra he flashed into the compound and pinged his chakra to locate the two. He found that they seemed to be waiting for him in the training ground. Naruto landed and looked up with his eyes still crimson glaring at Sasuke. He saw that the elder Uchiha was holding his daughter there with a kunai to her throat. Naruto just continued to glare at him. What the fuck got into the pea-sized brain of yours to take my daughter? The raven-haired man flashed that cocky smirk of his as Naruto continued to glare at him. She is an Uchiha, she needs to be raised by me. The blonde man growled at him. If you let her go now I will kill you. Quickly, Sasuke started to laugh as Naruto lifted up his hand and focused. It took him a moment to get the control to the point he needed, but he formed a small space between Makoto and Sasuke's kunai. Naruto looked at his daughter and nodded at her. She knew what she was supposed to do. Naruto had never fully trusted Sasuke around Makoto and that being said they had situations planned to get her back. Makoto brought her leg up and hit Sasuke where it hurt making him gasp. Taking the moment that he wouldn't be paying attention she ran to her father who quickly wrapped her up in a hug. He smiled at her. That's my girl, now you're going home to your mother. She is probably halfway up the wall with worry. Naruto made a clone then Makoto grabbed onto the clone before it flashed away back to the Uzumaki home. The real Naruto stood and looked at Sasuke as the man stood back up cradling his injury. That little bitch, I should just purify my clan line and kill her. She is that bastard of a traitor anyways. The Uzumaki stood there looking at him. Your brother was the best person to come from the Uchiha clan but don't worry, I will purify your clan line today. After I am finished, Makoto will be the only real Uchiha left, but she will always be my daughter and an Uzumaki at heart. Sasuke scoffed at the comment, then got ready for the battle that he knew was coming. He knew before they had initiated the plan to take Makoto that they would have to fight Naruto. He had hoped Suigetsu would be more useful in the situation, but that didn't appear to be the case. As the two Konohagakure nin stood there quietly waiting to move, Sasuke smiled, just like old times, huh? Naruto shook his head. No, this time you mean nothing to me, I will just kill you and end all of this. At the Uzumaki estate, the three women were sitting there anxiously as suddenly Naruto was standing there with Makoto holding onto him. All of the women looked at her as Makoto smiled, then ran to Tayayu. Her mother quickly wrapped her up in a hug and kissed her cheek. Makoto. Thank Kami, you are okay. Makoto smiled and held onto her mom until she was let go. Tayayu looked over at what she thought was really Naruto. Naruto-kun, is he dead? The clone shrugged. I don't know if the boss has killed the Uchiha yet. Tayayu looked at the clone. So you aren't my Naruto-kun, what were your orders? The clone of Naruto looked at her. Bring back Makoto and wait until he returns to make sure there is extra protection here. The red-headed woman nodded her head, then looked at Makoto, who was reassuring Carrie that she was fine. Tayayu now felt herself torn. She wanted to stay and watch her daughters, but she also wanted to be where Naruto was. She wanted to help him deal with the little fucker that thought he could threaten her family. The clone seemed to be sensing this though. He told me that he doesn't want you leaving the girls. There is a chance that the council was helping Sasuke. Tayayu growled at the clone. When the real you gets home, we are going to have a talk about you bossing me around. The clone just stared at her while thinking to himself, I am so glad that I am not the real version. Boss sounds like he is in for ass kicking. The matriarch for the Uzumaki clan went and sat down next to her daughters while being on guard. She knew that there was truth to the statement that the council may be working with Sasuke. She didn't want anyone else threatening her family, so she decided that she would just take it out on Naruto when he comes home. Back with Naruto and Sasuke. The two stood there for a moment, then they both reached back and threw a kunai at one another. They clashed in the air, making a bit of sparks before they flashed at one another. Sasuke reached back and pulled out a tanto from his back, then swung at Naruto. That blonde man smiled as he quickly pulled out his katana and blocked the tanto as they locked eyes. He watched as Sasuke's Sharingan started to spin. Naruto smiled as he stared at Sasuke. Your Sharingan won't give you any advantage against me. My eyes cancel out your genjutsus and I just won't use any hand signs. Sasuke just gave him a curious look as Naruto continued to smile, then focused as a burst of wind came and pushed him away. Sasuke looked around then at Naruto with confusion. This confirmed Naruto's suspicion that the Uchiha didn't know that people could bond with their elements. Naruto started to focus more on his wind control, just using Kurama's chakra in his eyes. The Uchiha looked at him. How did you do that, Naruto? The blonde shrugged, then held up his hand and made it so that the wind circled around Sasuke and flung him at the building. As the Uchiha went slamming into his own compound, Naruto smirked. He was just toying with the Uchiha for the time being. When the time came to kill him, he would suffocate him, that way no one could actually say it was him. There would be no way to prove it, at least. Sasuke came stumbling out of the rubble, then looked at Naruto. What the hell are you doing, Naruto? Naruto just smiled. I am getting rid of a stain on the world. Sasuke growled, then went through hand signs and finished before inhaling. Naruto smiled since he knew it was a fire jutsu. Sasuke blew out a fireball and Naruto put his hand up and drew the oxygen out of the fireball, making it disappear. This made it so that Sasuke's eyes went wide because he didn't know what was happening. All he knew was it was like Naruto was able to control the wind, but he knew that was impossible. Sasuke pulled out more kunai and threw them at Naruto, who dodged them all, then put some wind chakra in his feet and flashed at Sasuke. As the blonde got close, he drew back his fist, then thrusted it forward while putting some wind behind his fist and connected to Sasuke's chest. As the Uchiha went flying backwards, Naruto felt the monk's rib cage and spine break from the force of the impact. Sasuke went through the wall of the Uchiha compound and Naruto walked in after him. Naruto walked up to Sasuke as he laid on the ground, clearly in pain. Naruto stood over him as he looked down on the Uchiha. You were an idiot to take my daughter. I warned you not to try, and I told you that she is an Uzumaki, not a Uchiha. You sealed your fate, but you can redeem yourself a bit in my mind with this last act. Did the council help you with this? Sasuke stared at him as he struggled to breath, then nodded his head a bit. Naruto stared at him, then put his hand out and drew the oxygen out of Sasuke's lungs and let the man suffocate. The blonde man stared at the corpse, then disappeared back to his home to find his girls and wife. The Uzumaki estate. The blonde reappeared to see his clone, then dispersed it. As the memories came back, he looked over at his wife with a concerned look as she stared at him. Naruto came over to his family and gave a small smile. How are my ladies? Kari and Makoto both smiled and said good, while Tayayu just stared at him. Naruto looked at her, then over at Tsunade and gave her some money. Please get them some food, Ba-chan. I believe I am in trouble. The Godime nodded her head, then grabbed the girl's hands and left with them. Naruto summoned another clone and looked at it, watched them from a distance. The clone nodded, then disappeared as he looked back at his red-headed wife. What did I do now to you, Yaheim? She glared. So you are allowed to fight your own personal wars on your own, but I can't fight mine. He looked at her. That isn't what it was about. The council was supposedly helping them try and take Makoto from us. I had to make sure that our daughters were protected, and my clone would have dispersed after one hit. Tayayu continued to just glare at him, then looked away with an irritated sigh. I hate when you make sense. Naruto smiled at his wife, then put his hand under her chin and made it so she looked at him. We can just say that you came up with the idea. She smiled, then grabbed his chin. You know, I think you are getting wiser in your old age. The blonde rose his eyebrow at her. Old age? Aren't you older than me? The look that he was giving him was enough to shut him up as he looked at her brown eyes. The man gave her a sheepish smile, then kissed her to try and get out of the trouble he caused. The woman let him kiss her, then when he broke, he looked at her. You know, the girls should be gone for a while. If you were serious about trying to have a son, there is no time like the present. The woman just looked at him for a bit, then gave a smirk, definitely getting smarter. To be continued.